Hello, my name is Paige Bergeron. I did a research report on mental health in America's youth for Professor Kennington, English 053. Depression is a significant public health issue that transcends communities and countries. It seems to be a frequent topic of discussion in schools, homes, and news media throughout the country, especially how it relates to mass shootings. Depression and suicide among adolescents ages 12 through 20 is a highly controversial conversation with many different approaches. Through my research, I have discovered factors of depression, classifications of different types of depression, signs of depression, influences, and treatments among the young people of America. With our country's newfound sensitivity for mental health in our youth comes confusion and conversations. This topic is nothing to scoff at, and what the older generations of Americans need to understand is that teen suicide and depression is not a trend. It is not something that is noble or that kids like to see. We need to get comfortable with uncomfortable conversations. This is just a phase, and just get over it are disastrous statements. Depression is defined as a state of low mood and aversion to activity. Depression is more than that. While depression can be thought of as a normal human emotion, the feeling can be so intense that it creates a mental disorder and often leads to suicidal thoughts. It is thought that mental hygiene is just as important as physical hygiene. That is to say, just as following proper rules of physical hygiene can help avoid physical illness, so following the proper mental life may aid in preventing mental illness. The contributing factors of depression are many and are not limited to the following: biological chemistry, hormones, learned negative habits, and school. While in my research, I found several sources that claimed biological chemistry is in fact not a contributing factor to depression in adolescents. There was one book that said it was one of the biggest contributors. Neurotransmitters are naturally occurring brain chemicals that carry signals to other parts of your brain and body. When these chemicals are abnormal or impaired, the function of nerve receptors and nerve systems change, leading to depression. These abnormal chemicals in your body are from generations upon generations of family members who have had depression in the past. From personal experience, I can definitely agree with the statement that depression is something that is passed down through your family. On my father's side, I've had multiple relatives that have struggled with substance abuse, depression, and suicide. While depression can be a very touchy subject, it is important to ask your parents about your family's history with depression, suicide, and drug abuse to become aware of the additional genetic predisposition you may be in. My siblings and I have struggled with developing coping mechanisms as we've grown up. My dad has been a guide in telling us that it is important to stay active, create long-lasting friendships, and putting yourself in a happy environment. The next serious contributor of teenage depression is hormones. Since girls go through puberty earlier in life, they are more at risk for developing depression earlier. The hormones that are coursing through a teenager's body at any given time is immense. The difference in boys and girls going through depression is very similar, and both are equally at risk for depressive or suicidal behaviors at any given age. However, girls are twice as likely to actually develop depression. According to a neurologist, adolescence is the most tumultuous time for a brain since birth. The emotions that teenagers feel every day is immeasurable. As a 17-year-old teenage girl, I can safely say none of it is easy. I have been through periods of time where my own mental health is the last thing I'm thinking about. I was worried about my boyfriend, my friends, my grades, my homework, absolutely everything other than how I'm actually doing, and it caused a huge downturn in my life. It was very hard for me to get up and out of bed every day because I felt that I wasn't able to deal with everything going on in my life. While males can develop depression and suicidal thoughts, not a lot of people realize that young women are going through the ringer trying to cope with current societal pressures. A teen girl who attempted suicide said, "Suicide is the bravest thing you can do." Young women think this day because we are constantly taught that we, as women, need to act a certain way and be a certain way. Eventually, it becomes too much. With males, violent thoughts and carelessness are the main concern. Boys tend to show that they don't care about where their life is going when they are struggling with depression. With all these factors in play, our hormones get the better of us and we tend to act out or become depressed. With teenagers, it's hard to find the in-between. One factor of teenage depression is learned negative habits. This can include, and is not limited to, sleeping, thinking, and electronic habits. With sleeping habits, it is nearly impossible for a teenager to go to bed early. The hormones in our bodies do not let us. Most adolescents need 9 hours of sleep every night, which is hard to accomplish given that the average school starts between 7 a.m. and 8 a.m. It almost seems like their school setting you up to fail because of the sheer amount of work and classes you have to take at the same time and how you're also expected to do so much. Negative thinking in a teen can become very habitual when surrounded by adults and their peers who can unconsciously influence negative thinking. By negative thinking, teens can become very hard on themselves. Imagine if you were constantly surrounded by people who call themselves ugly, worthless, and stupid all the time. This is high school. On social media, teens complain about life and compare themselves to others who are more attractive than they are, or those who seem to have better, more fulfilling lives than they have. At home, adolescents could learn those negative thinking and/or coping patterns if their parent is unhappy and getting down on themselves. It is hard for a teenager to recognize that that is not a healthy way for them to cope with their emotions. Unhealthy electronic habits are very common among young people. On average, teens spend 9 hours a day on some sort of electronic device that could be affecting their memory, concentration, and sleeping habits. Depression can be something that is nearly impossible to identify in a young person. Most tend to hide it, or even try to become the happiest person in the room just so they're not bringing others down. While it is the person's job to report that they need help and that they're struggling, there becomes a time where school professionals and parents need to recognize the signs of depression, which can include social withdrawal, loss of interest in sports or hobbies, sudden weight gain or loss, excessive moodiness, or a decline in academic performance. All of these factors and more can seriously affect a young mind. During teen years, the frontal lobe is developing, and that's why young people often make poor decisions. The frontal lobe affects mood and risk-taking, which is why during teen years, mood swings, drug experimentation, and overall bad decisions are more prevalent during this tumultuous time. Through my research, I have discovered that schools are doing more and more all the time to help kids through this tough time. For my interview, I chose my cousin, who is a middle school counselor. Some of the questions I asked her include the following. 1. What is the student-to-counselor ratio at your school? Her response was approximately 350 to 1. National recommendations are maximum 250 to 1. Our elementary schools are more like 600 to 1, and high schools are 400 to 1. Question 2. Do most kids ask for help? No, most kids do not ask for help, but we are so inundated with students that we cannot possibly meet the demands. We are still wrestling with societal norms that we don't want to acknowledge. Taking care of mental health is normal and preventative. There are also significant differences among the various cultures we serve and their perspective on how to handle, or not, mental/emotional issues within the family. Question 3. What is something you want the general public to understand about teen depression? Her response. I'd like the general public to understand that gender is a social construct that we, as a culture, impose on a human being at birth. The die is cast based on what genitalia you are born with. Think pink for girls, blue for boys, dolls for girls, trucks for boys. So when a child is trying to figure out their true selves and it does not fit within the societal norms, something is wrong. We're getting better, and it's always the extremists that make the most noise and certainly don't reflect the majority of society. We are all constantly learning and adapting. The last question I asked her was, what is her opinion on teen suicide? Her response was, the world is getting more and more complex. Kids have access to tragedy around the world in real time. Immediate gratification has become the norm with social media, and when vulnerable youth do not get their tank full, insecurity can lead to depression, anxiety, suicidal ideation, etc. Suicide cognition is also a real phenomenon. We have to be vigilant in how we get the messaging and healing out to our communities when a suicidal tragedy occurs. Again, it also goes back to cultural and societal norms. Today's youth experience tremendous stress, often more than adults. That's research-based. We also have unstable family systems to contend with that put mental health in jeopardy. I know older adults who have lost loved ones to suicide, and yet we still can't talk about it. It's still perceived as a dirty secret, when in reality we should be saying, so-and-so died from suicide, just like so-and-so died from cancer. They are both just deaths caused by illness. With such a widespread problem, what is one to do? There are many different approaches to how one might start healing. Among the different solutions and treatments, I found learn how to talk to someone who is struggling. If you are depressed, learn to help yourself and find what makes you happy. Therapy, psychopharmacology, medications, parent involvement, and intervention. Proper assessment of one's depressive symptoms is crucial in determining the right course of treatment. The use of antidepressants in an adolescent should be looked at as a last resort. In my research, teens with depression claim that they prefer psychotherapy. Psychotherapy teaches coping skills to teens. I see taking antidepressants as a distraction and not as a solution. It seems more temporary with no long-term effects, whereas psychotherapy allows healing at the source of the problem. Learning about all the different factors of teenage depression was very informational. I hope to help my friends by identifying odd behavior and helping them with their depressive behaviors, and I hope that if I feel depressed, I can take action to help myself or reach out. Society today is becoming better with recognizing that depression among teenagers is not something that is easily taken care of. We are getting better and helping people get the help they need. While I do believe there is always more that we as a society can do to be better, I feel that students, faculty, and parents are becoming more aware of this very common illness among the young people of America, and I hope one day it is an unknown phenomenon. Thank you so much. Bye-bye.